True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. We do everything we can to ensure that everything we broadcast is fair and factual, but the opinions expressed and statements made by our guests are theirs and theirs alone. These opinions and statements do not reflect the views or opinions of our presenters, Due North PR, or the podcast itself. You're listening to True North, a regular roundup of business and community news and developments in Northland. Hello and welcome to True North. Thank you for taking the time to listen. It's Wednesday, the 25th of June. I'm Peter Heath. On the show ahead.
Generally, we've spent a lot of time on our tourism promotion and our economic capability building, but the investment area is something we're really going to focus on over the next 20-24 months.
I speak with Northland Inc CEO Paul Linton about what that organisation has been doing by way of securing investment in Northland by investors from outside the region. First, though, a look at what's happening in business and community news across our region. Northland's 3 district councils have all completed community consultation over how they will deliver water services in future. The consultation will inform the water services delivery plans that they must submit to the Department of Internal Affairs by the government's deadline of September the 3rd this year. These delivery plans will outline how each council expects to manage water infrastructure and supply under Local Water Done Well, the government's framework for upgrading and modernising the country's water infrastructure that replaces the ill-fated Three Waters programme. Options available to each council included an in-house business unit, a standalone council-controlled organisation, or CCO, for each district, or a combined multi-council CCO looking after water Northland-wide. Consultations indicated that in Whangarei there was a clear preference for keeping its water services in-house with increased collaboration with other Northland councils. Kaipara was in favour of the Northland-wide CCO, and the Far North showed preference for a strengthened in-house model with improvements to delivery, governance, compliance and financial management. However, we understand that despite the differing approaches arising from the consultation, current thinking within all 3 councils is to explore the possibility of establishing a regional CCO. To be clear, this is our understanding only. For their part, the 3 councils have issued a joint press release announcing only that they have established a cross-council working group to, quotes, work through what collaboration across councils could look like. The Northland Water Services Working Group is made up of elected members from each council. Representatives from the Department of Internal Affairs and an independent advisor will attend each meeting, and the working group will make recommendations to each council for decision-making later this year. The group's chair, Whangarei Mayor Vince Coccarello, said that while options and preferences in each district varied, all were committed to getting around the table and evaluating the opportunities of working together and solving common challenges. So, and pardon the pun, the situation is still very fluid. The Water Services Bill, which gives life to Local Water Done Well, hasn't yet passed its 3rd reading, and council elections are imminent, so lots could still change and probably will. There's still plenty of water to flow under this particular bridge, so to speak. You can hear more about the whole Local Water Done Well matter and the impacts and implications for Northland in episode 3 of True North, where we spoke with Far North Mayor Moko Tupania. And we will include in the show notes links to the results of each council's consultation on their recommended way forward. ASB has released its 2025 first quarter regional economic scoreboard, showing Northland in 13th spot out of 16 regions and down substantially from 8th a year ago. Consumer sentiment in the region improved over quarter 4, translating into increased spending with retail sales that surpassed the national average. New car registrations also showed growth, ranking 2nd in the country. Meanwhile, the housing market remained subdued, with house prices down 3.3% annually, though house sales showed some momentum. Northland's labour market stayed weak, only slightly better than Taranaki's. Employment growth continued to slow, and the unemployment rate edged higher. Monetary policy easing appears to be taking longer to impact the economy, particularly the labour market, according to the bank. It expects that employment expansion in Northland will remain slow over the next quarter, though the primary sector will continue to be a focal point. The construction sector weakened quarter over quarter, particularly in non-residential construction, signalling potential business expansion challenges that could negatively impact the regional economy. Looking ahead, the bank says, Northland's economy should benefit from lower interest rates, with the primary sector thriving due to higher dairy and meat prices. Despite this, persistent challenges remain, especially amidst heightened global uncertainties. We will include a link to the survey in the show notes. And finally, 3 consortia have been confirmed as bidders for the next section of the Northern Expressway from Warkworth to Tahana. The groups must now submit a request for proposals, setting out how they intend to finance, design, construct, manage and maintain the section of the expressway. The preferred bidder will be chosen in early 2026, with the contract finalised by the middle of the year and construction to begin later in the year. We will include in the show notes links to 2 media stories which provide details of the names and composition of each consortium. Now, we recorded this interview with Northland Inc CEO Paul Linton back in March. One of the topics Paul brought to the discussion was the, at that time, seemingly unlikely subject of special economic zones. Then, wouldn't you know it, just 2 days later, Associate Energy Minister Shane Jones dropped his bombshell that the government was considering a special economic zone for Marsden Point. Needless to say, Paul was delighted, but it was as much news to him as it was to us, so we went ahead and pre-released that section of the discussion. We have edited much of it out of this episode, but you can catch it in its entirety wherever you're listening to this. Just look for the special episode called A Northland Special Economic Zone, Convenient Political Fantasy? ? We also covered the topic of the proposed special economic zone in a discussion with Minister Jones in our very first episode, so you can hear more there too. But now, turning back to this episode. For the longest time, Northland has been associated with a very limited and unsophisticated range of economic activity, primarily primary industries in the areas of agriculture, forestry, fishing and tourism. This is starting to change, and today the region can point to exciting developments in geothermal and solar energy production, marine engineering, zero-emission waste management solutions, and specialist agricultural and horticultural production, among other endeavours. Joining us today to discuss this economic diversification and investment by businesses and industries from outside Northland is the head of the region's Economic Development Agency, Paul Linton. Kia ora, Paul, and thanks for joining us on True North.
Oh, kia ora, Peter. It's nice to be here.
Hey, look, Paul, is it fair to say that Northland has been a bit traditional and limited in its economic aspirations? And if so, how's this changing? And I guess I'm interested in exploring today about what tangible steps, actual physical things that you can point to, is Northland Inc taking to ensure economic diversification by encouraging new and exciting businesses and industries to establish themselves in Northland?
Yeah, no, thanks, Peter. So that's an area that we're beefing up this year. But I mean, over the last 12 to 24 months, we've been working with a number of manufacturing companies and a number of organisations interested in the primary sector and the tourism sector. So, for example, we're working with a couple of hotel developers at the moment, because that's one of the big infrastructure deficits of the north. And some of the other areas we're working on is just how do we get added value manufacturing into the north? And that's where places like NAFA come into play. And also that's where places like, Marsden Point comes into play. How do we get more companies, especially in that advanced manufacturing space, onto Marsden Point? I mean, the reality is the nature of our work, we sit under a number of NDAs with individual organisations. So I can't name names, but I can say, look, we're working with a number of companies, especially in that manufacturing space.
So you asked a question in that answer, which is how do we? And what's your take? What's Northland's sort of best feel about this at the moment? How do we do that? How are you doing that?
Yes, I think one of the biggest challenges we've got here in the north is competition for capital, right? So we've got a number of opportunities here in the north. How do we get capital into this region? From an economic development lens, many of our projects are multi-year, and some of them are I would call them semi-commercial. They might be in the iwi space or they might be in the social space. So it depends on the profile of the investor. Is the investor looking at a shorter-term commercial return, or are they looking at more a 10 to 20 year investment, and they're going to be a really good long-term partner? Is it purely commercial, or is there a philanthropic lens on that as well? So those are some of the challenges that we're looking at. It's just trying to find the right partner for the right project.
And how successful do you feel you guys have been, or has your focus been in other areas? For example, building up capability inside Northland. Bearing in mind that we're looking here particularly at the encouragement of inward investment.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time on our tourism promotion and our economic capability building. But the investment area is something we're really going to focus on over the next 24 months, especially when you see what the central government's doing with their new investment agency that they're going to be setting up. That means we're going to be looking at FDI into New Zealand a lot more. The thing for us is, how do we make sure we get some of that investment into Northland and it doesn't go into just, say, Auckland or Rotorua or Queenstown or the Waikato or somewhere else?
So again, what's the answer to that question?
Partly, I think it's profile. Partly, it's being there, marketing with them, and it's having a really good deal pipeline. And that's one of the things that we want to work with local projects. We provide feasibility studies for a number of projects across the north. We've done that throughout our history. We help with early business case and feasibility analysis, and a number of projects across the north have got off the ground because of that work, because they take those business cases and those feasibilities, and that helps them raise money. I think what's needed, though, is a better coordinated approach across the north. So where are the projects that are going to make the impact? Where are the projects going to create real wealth and jobs? And what is the helicopter overview of that? And then matching that up with investors.
So when you talk about that coordinated approach, what's that going to take? Who's going to drive it? I'm assuming you guys will drive it, but what's it going to take? And if it doesn't exist already, why hasn't it taken form?
Yeah, well, I think partly because people haven't really got together in that space. We've got a helicopter overview, but we have limited resources and limited people. So what we're looking for is a bigger pipeline of projects across the north, identifying what those projects are, how are they going to contribute to the economy, and if they're going to happen anyway, they should happen. Because the private sector will invest if it's a good commercial project, and they should do that anyway. Where we're going to come in is say, okay, if there are projects that are of strategic significance, how do we get in behind and help make them happen? So examples at the moment is the advocacy work we do along with others, like the Chamber of Commerce, like the corporate group, to get in and really advocate hard for our 4-lane expressway, or our port expansion, or our dry dock, or the energy bridge. There's a number of different projects, and they all need to get going. So how do we make sure we get that investment in there? And some of that investment's going to come from New Zealand, and some of it isn't. Some of it's going to be foreign investment. So how do we develop that? And one of the ways other countries have developed that, you just have to look at Shenzhen, just out of Hong Kong. You look at what Dubai's done with Knowledge Village and up and down Sheikh Zayed Road and a whole lot of other places, is special purpose or special economic zones. Now, that became a dirty word in a lot of economists' views for a long time, because they see it as corporate welfare. It's just another economic tool. If we were able to develop those sorts of zones around areas like Marsden Point, around areas like Ngāwhara Innovation Park for primary added value manufacturing, I think we need to start having this conversation, because doing the same thing we've always done will get us the same result. If we do want to build out our industries, we are going to have to provide some sort of package of incentive to get people in here, especially international investors, because we're in a globally competitive market. They don't have to come here. New Zealand is only one option. Now, if we could get that we would see Marsden Point and that whole Ruakaka area build out really well. And we're talking high-value jobs. We're talking high-value manufacturing. We're talking energy-based. If I look at NAFA, extrapolate that in a primary sector model, so primary sector manufacturing, this is the sort of thing, this is the sort of thinking we need. And it need not go on forever. There can be a time frame on these things. This is a perfect time to be attracting high-profile, high-net-worth individuals to New Zealand, to Northland, because of the geopolitical situation. If there's one place that people would like to come, it's New Zealand. So if we can get to the Northland with their expertise, with their investment, with their channels to market, with their customer base, we could shortcut 10 years trying to do this organically.
Oh, okay. You said just a minute ago in the answer to the previous question that we need to get better at selling Northland.
Yeah.
Well, presumably that's Northland Inc's job, right? Is selling Northland. So
yes, it is.
So when you say we, are you talking about Northland Inc? Are you talking about Northland Inc in partnership with other Northland entities? What do you mean we, and what does getting better look like? What would a better approach than the one that we've adopted to date actually look like in your view?
Yeah, so if you look at what does selling Northland means, on one side of it, you've got the tourism side. So we're out there promoting Northland all the time. Northlanders often don't see that because that promotion is outside of Northland, as it should be.
Yep.
Into Auckland, into the Waikato, into Australia, and into Europe. So that's ongoing all the time. In fact, we're just launching our autumn campaign. But we're here today talking about investment into Northland, and that's the area I think we can get better at holistically.
What do we need to do that we're not doing at the moment, either as Northland Inc or as Northland Inc plus a collective of business leaders?
Yeah, I don't think we're aligned as well as we could be with the likes of Investment New Zealand, with the New Zealand government. So when they're out promoting New Zealand internationally, we need to make sure we've got that Northern aspect very, very strongly in there. But it's not just at a promotion or a generic level. It's at a specific level. We've got to be ready with specific projects and specific opportunities. You know, we've got to be deal ready. And that's something you do in partnership because we don't own the projects in that sense. You know, there are projects all over Northland.
So in terms of being deal ready, and that's a good point, what do Northlanders and Northland businesses and business entities, the kind of people who are going to be listening to this podcast, what do they need to do to help you attract that inward investment? And what kind of relationship are you wanting to develop with business that perhaps you don't have at the moment that will put you on a better footing to be able to do that?
Yeah, so some projects will go ahead anyway. I mean, if you look at some of the large utility players, they've got their own plans, their own funding, their own 10, 30-year strategies, and they will go ahead and do that, and so they should. But if you look at some of maybe the mid-sized projects, which might be in the tourism product space or might be in the manufacturing space, they might be with Māori or on Māori land. It's just making sure we've got a really good understanding of what that pipeline is out there and what the challenges those project owners are having in terms of realising those projects. And that's where we come in.
What, in terms of resolving those challenges?
Or helping them work the way through those challenges and maybe helping them source capital if they need it.
Okay. All right. On that, I wanted just to, in closing, if I may, talk to you a little bit about the take-up of space at NAFA Innovation Park. It seems to be pretty thin, and particularly from companies outside of Northland. So why has the promise of heavily discounted electricity not proven more of a game changer to potential investors in the park? I mean, that was supposed to be one of the big draw cards for this sort of closed loop manufacturing environment that was hoped to be developed there?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think you have to put it in the context of the last couple of years, because there were a couple of manufacturing companies that were looking at setting up on that park about maybe 2-3 years ago. But if you look at the fact that many of those companies have been through COVID, then they've been through a recession, and then we've had cyclones and so on, a lot of them were looking really at their core business rather than expansion. So it's a question partly of timing and opportunity. So we need to stimulate that again and get the next cycle coming round. The other thing that's a challenge, of course, is the infrastructure. So we have challenging roads. You know, if you're going to export primary produce down to Auckland, there's a cost to do that. So the sooner we get our infrastructure in place and really good roading networks to places like Ngāwha and others, that's going to help us.
Listen, I asked before what Northlanders and Northland businesses and entities needed to do to help you do your job. Just looking briefly at mana whenua, do you feel that any responsibility lies with mana whenua and iwi-led commercial entities to encourage businesses outside of Northland and New Zealand to invest in our region? I mean, there's a lot of criticism around mana whenua sometimes as constantly playing the no card. Do you feel that there's an element of responsibility there in terms of economic development that people could reasonably look to mana whenua to assist in that regard?
Yeah, look, I can only talk about my experiences with the Maori enterprises, and they've been very positive. You know, there are a number of hapu and iwi who are actively looking for opportunities, and they're actively looking investing in their own areas, and you know, we're here to enable and support them. But at the end of the day, it's up to those Maori enterprises to determine, you know, what they're going to do with their own land and their own projects and how they progress, how they want to fund them, who would be a partner, and so on. And like I said, I know a number of those enterprises are actively looking at projects and investors at the moment. So, you know, my experience so far is perhaps a little different.
Okay.
There's actually quite a positive perception out there within that community.
All right. So, you know, I don't want to give the impression for a minute that the no culture is centered entirely around mana whenua. There is a serious no culture around, though. I'm just wondering whether you feel, as Northland Inc, as the organisation that's responsible for bringing organisations to invest in our region, whether you feel that the wider no culture has hurt us when it comes to inward investment.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge there is finding the right investors, and it's being able to do the due diligence of making sure that the investor who's interested in that land or that property development or the potential hotel or aquaculture or manufacturing or whatever it might be is the right partner. If we're just talking generally about Northland in particular, is it hard to do business here, I guess, is the question, right?
Yeah.
Is it hard
to invest here? Are you constantly going to be beset by the no factor?
Well, I would hope we weren't. I tend to be more glass half full than half empty.
Well, you wouldn't be the head of the regional investment organisation if you weren't, but yeah, cool.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's a case of doing your research and your due diligence first, you know.
And is that something you feel you can help the potential inward investor with?
I think we can help a lot with that. Yeah. From my conversations around the whole region, I feel some of these opportunities have broken down. There's been a communication gap for whatever reason, and there's been perhaps not a meeting of the minds in terms of process, culture, tikanga, expectations on the investor versus expectations of the local partner.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of more groundwork has to be done to get to a good space. And I just wonder whether as much groundwork has been done in some of these areas as it could have been.
It sounds simple, doesn't it? But trying to get that to happen in real life would be
that would be a great outcome if we could get there.
Absolutely. Oh, well, we can always wish and we can always hope. Paul, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you today. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. It was really good to talk to you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Peter.
And that's all for today's program. Many thanks to Northland Inc's Paul Linton. True North will return in 2 weeks' time on the 9th of July. I'll be talking to Fabian Hannick, Assistant Plant Manager at NAFA Generation Limited's geothermal power station near Kaikoui, about the perfect storm of circumstances that came within a whisker of forcing the closure of this vital piece of Northland infrastructure, and how some radical out-of-the-box thinking, backed by some number 8 wire and a company with a lot to lose, saved the day and Northland's energy resilience. I'm Peter Heath. Thank you for listening. True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. To support our work and to stay on top of Northland business news and analysis, access the pod on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please do take that small extra step and subscribe, like, follow, comment, and review, as it helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not yet be aware that we exist. As the New Zealand media landscape continues to change, we rely on your support to continue doing what we do. Please let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask questions or make suggestions about topics and people we should feature by emailing us at truenorth@duenorthpr.co.nz. We do read every message.